Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with a midweek update in the world of cannabis. So before we jump in, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you're ready. Before we get into Curaleaf's earnings, I just wanted to share a few marijuana moment stories. Now, firstly, a bill on studying cannabis from dispensaries heads to Biden's desk after congressional passage. So I consider this a positive. It's the first of anything cannabis related to make it to Biden's desk for signature, as the U.S. House of Representatives on Friday approved a massive infrastructure bill that includes provisions aimed at allowing researchers to study the actual cannabis that consumers are purchasing from state legal dispensaries instead of having to use only government-grown cannabis, because government-grown cannabis is not the same as what's being sold across the country. While the legislation also encourages states that have enacted legalization laws to educate people about impaired driving, although the data shows that it does not increase impaired driving at all, so probably best to consider educating people about that and alcohol still. But with this latest House action to concur with changes made by the Senate, the bill now heads to President Biden's desk. So I'd say this is positive, but I think the American people and myself would rather him telling his administration to start the descheduling process, because we've seen in the past the U.S. government conduct studies on cannabis, but they've only looked for harms, and when they found that there were no harms, they just didn't share the studies with the public, which is ridiculous. So we'd much rather just have cannabis descheduled from the CSA completely. I think that would increase his chances of getting reelected next year. But on top of that, get this. The Biden administration will keep denying public housing over cannabis despite Congresswoman's request. Now, this is ridiculous, and this just shows us, like, does Biden not want to get reelected? Because he's doing everything in his power to not make the American people happy, or to show that he's not working for the American people. As the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development says, it is required to continue denying federally assisted housing to people who use cannabis, even if they're acting in compliance with state law. So if you're in a state where medical cannabis is legal, you can no longer get federally assisted housing if you're using the medicine that goes to fit your illness or whatever you are using the medicine for. How horrible is that? Rep. Eleanor Holmes Norton sent a letter to HUD Sec. Marcia Fudge in May imploring the department to use executive discretion and not punish people over cannabis in legal states. The department response letter, which Norton released on Tuesday, said that consistent with federal law, HUD prohibits the admission of users of cannabis to HUD-assisted housing, including those who use medical cannabis. So basically, the Biden administration saying to the American people that if you need medicine and you want federally assisted housing, you best keep making our largest donors happy and taking addictive and potentially dangerous prescription medications. Because if you dare venture to a safer, non-addictive alternative medicine like cannabis, and it happens to be legal in your state, you're no longer going to qualify for federally assisted housing, which is just shameful and more in line with the fact that it seems like the Biden administration just does not want to be in power, and they're doing everything they can to make the American people angry. On to Curaleaf's earnings as they report their third quarter 2021 results, bringing in revenue of $317 million, an increase of 2% sequentially and 74% year over year. On top of that, third quarter 2021 adjusted EBITDA, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, of $71 million, which is an increase of 69% year over year, with third quarter cash flow from operations of $52 million, or 16% of revenue. Now, 2% sequentially was not as big of growth as we were anticipating, but keep in mind, Curaleaf has been the sector leader for a few years now, so when you're the sector leader, it's hard to continue this large-scale growth quarter over quarter. So it's important to look at the big picture and remind yourself how early on we are, because as an investor, I look at three main things. Fundamentals: is the company financially healthy? What is the consumer behavior around the industry? And what is the total addressable market like? And as we go through this, we're still going to see that the financials are quite healthy for Curaleaf and other MSOs as we go on through the week. But more importantly, what's driving the growth in this industry is the consumer behavior and the fact that Americans are voting for cannabis with their dollars, and the total addressable market. As just more states decide to reform their laws, that's going to make the total addressable market even bigger. And it's not like we've created a new market, right? This has always been an illegal market. We're just deciding to make it a legal one and bringing, all those illegal sales into the legal market. So that's why over time, as this industry, it's still an emerging growth industry, but as it matures, not saying it's close to maturity yet, it's more important to look at the year-over-year numbers than to worry much about the quarter-over-quarter fluctuations. So just wanted to share that as we look through the highlights. Third quarter 2021 financial highlights for total revenue of $317 million, up from $312 last quarter, so just a 2% quarter-over-quarter increase. However, year-over-year, it is up from $182 million and a 74% increase from where they sold last year at this time. Now, the other thing I want to look at more importantly is gross margin on cannabis sales. These margins will fluctuate as companies expand in an emerging growth industry. They are down to 45.6% from 49.6 and 49.7. So industry-wide, we are seeing a decrease, which is not ideal. However, over time, they're obviously going to try and pick that back up as they get their operations under control. While their adjusted EBITDA, $71.3 million, is down from $84.3 million last quarter, so that did fall 15%. But again, year over year from where they were last year at this point, especially compared to some of the LPs like Canopy, 42.2 or positive 42.2 of adjusted earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortization is a positive, I'd say, overall. And they did suffer a net loss attributable to Curaleaf Holdings. But if we go through here, it is a perfect example of what these companies have to face with the 280E tax, because they did actually manage an positive income from operations of roughly $40 million. However, they have a lot of expenses, and a main expense is that 280E income tax, making them pay an effective more than 50% tax rate. So that's where a lot of that income goes. So if the Biden administration were to start the descheduling process, for example, and deschedule cannabis, then, for example, they would keep a lot more profit and have a positive operating income from operations. So just to share that. Third quarter operating highlights: they opened 2 dispensaries located in Bordentown, New Jersey and Wells, Maine, bringing total retail locations to 109 as of September 30th, 2021, while they expanded the number of U.S. wholesale accounts by 6% sequentially, exceeding 2,100 active accounts as of September 30th, 2021. Also on track to organically add 275,000 square feet of flower canopy by year end 2021. On top of that, they introduced Select Squeeze THC-infused beverage enhancer in several new markets, including Michigan, New Jersey, and New York. And they launched Click by Select Premium Vape System, a unique hardware design featuring a proprietary pod and durable stainless steel encasing in Arizona, California, Nevada, Oregon, with additional markets expected by year-end 2021. On top of that, post third quarter operating highlights, they closed the previously announced acquisition of Los Sueños Farms and its related entities, bringing total Curaleaf cultivation capacity to approximately 4.4 million square feet and retail locations to 111 as of November 8th, 2021, and they did enter into a definitive agreement to acquire Tryke Companies, a vertically integrated MSO operating in Nevada, Arizona, and Utah, but we're going to cover that in the next slide. So as we break down their revenue, their retail revenue did increase to $224 million, up from $222 and up from $135 million a year ago at this point, but that quarter-over-quarter increase in retail revenue was not a whole lot. Mind you, it's not like they opened up a whole lot more stores, just going to show that sales are strong, as we did see it slow down in certain states. They still managed strong sales and increased from last quarter. So I'd say that's still positive. While their wholesale revenue, despite increasing a lot of accounts they mentioned, did not grow that much. So it's just up to $92 million, up from $89 million. But again, last year at this time, up from $44.9 million. And so as the MSO that aimed to be the largest with the most retail locations, that is their main revenue driver, of course. But if we take a look at cost of goods sold, I just wanted to point this out, because in Q2, they spent $156 million to make $311 million revenue, which increased their margins last quarter, but they spent $172 million to make $316. So what was the cause of that? The change in gross margin primarily reflects a one-time loss on inventory related to the Eureka, California facility divestiture, lower revenue growth in certain Northeast markets, and the write-down of certain other inventory in the third quarter of 2021, partially offset by ongoing cultivation and process inefficiencies. Excluding one-time impacts, third quarter 2021 gross margin was 47.7%. So all in all, I think Curaleaf had a fine quarter despite analysts expecting a lot more out of them, but I thank you, Curaleaf, for setting the bar low, because you've been the industry leader for a long time, and so I think it's time to improve the sentiment a little bit with a new industry leader being Harvest, and hopefully they can announce some decent numbers and crush estimates on Monday when they do that, which will allow you, Curaleaf, to fix these inefficiencies and come back next quarter to compete as the industry leader. But this might help them do that, as they did manage to acquire Tryke Companies. So just a little bit of detail. They announced they've entered into a definitive agreement to acquire Tryke Companies, a privately held, vertically integrated, multi-state cannabis operator, in a cash and stock transaction valued at approximately $286 million. The transaction is expected to close in the second half of 2022, subject to customary approvals and conditions. So under the terms of the agreement, Curaleaf will pay $40 million in cash at closing, with the remaining $75 million in cash to be paid in equal installments on the first, second, and third anniversaries of the closing. The stock option of the transaction, which consists of 17 million subordinate voting shares, so they will be diluting shareholders, unfortunately, to make this, will also be paid in 3 equal installments of the first, second, and third anniversaries of the closing. An incremental earnout of up to 1 million Curaleaf shares will be paid in 2023 based on the business executing or exceeding certain EBITDA targets for 2022. And so if you wanted to learn a little bit more about Tryke, you can pause to read here as well. So lastly, just wanted to share these clips of Boris from the conference call Monday post-market after he released his earnings. He got some questions about cannabis reform, safe banking, and what is the atmosphere in DC after the news of this new bill coming out. So this one is about cannabis reform, and this one is about interstate commerce. So I want to share these two clips. So thank you, Sabatino, another MSO investor on Twitter and a great source for sharing these and making them very convenient.
Advance in the midterms, and that's cannabis. It is the biggest bipartisan issue in this country. both the Republicans and the Democrats want legalization. They all want safe banking on this thing. And the Democrats got elected a year ago and basically have done nothing except talk. And the fact that we're seeing now the moderate wing of the Republican Party step in and start to push cannabis legislation, we believe is going to force the Democrats to also start to push this. Because if the Democrats go into the midterm elections without cannabis legislation, they're going to pay dearly. And as it is, they're having a rough time right now. And so it's my personal opinion that this bill coming out of a conservative South Carolina Republican Congresswoman is a major deal in Washington. And I can tell you, I got off a call today at noon, and the talk is very, very, rampant in D.C. right now, and there's no way the Democrats are going to want the Republicans to run away as the leaders on cannabis reform. And so I think this is all very, very good for the industry. The fact you've got both parties now pushing legislation and both parties wanting to be seen as leaders in
the Dems wanting to be seen as leaders instead of leading. They've had 10 months to do something
in reforming the cannabis sector. So, this is probably the most, as you know, I'm very cautious usually on these things. This is probably one of the most positive things I've seen happen, and this is going to push Schumer, Wyden, Booker to move on their legislation as well. And so I think we could get a compromise. How it's going to happen, whether it's going to be in the NDAA or is it going to come as an attachment to something else, I can't tell you right now. But I can tell you the talk in Washington right now is definitely on cannabis. And we've been told by the Democrats that as soon as they can get reconciliation done, this and voting are going to be their two highest priorities for the spring of next year. So, with now the Republicans coming in on the back of it, I think it's a very big positive for the industry.
I agree. Thank you, Boris, for that. And then this is his answer to interstate commerce, how soon we might actually see this become a reality.
My gut on this, Paulo, is that even if we get interstate commerce, it's going to take years before it's put into effect, right? They're going to have to write the rules. They're going to have to come up with how they're going to do it. So, and I personally think the compromise is going to be where I think if one thing that gets compromised on will probably be in the short-term interstate commerce because of pressure from the states, governors, and attorney generals to keep it isolated in the states. So I still think that even though I'm not opposed to interstate commerce, there are many that are, I'm not opposed to it. I want to make that point clear. I don't think that's going to be, that's probably one issue that could get negotiated out of the bill. I believe we have a better chance now of getting a bill by April of next year than we did, a week ago because of this. But I still think interstate commerce is the one thing, that and import, that's probably going to get negotiated out of the bill. Thank you.
So thank you, Boris, for your insights, and Sabatino for sharing. And I just wanted to relay that I think what he's talking about in April would be some sort of a compromise bill between CAOA and what the Republicans are about to file. Because Schumer did say earlier this year that he wants to see cannabis decriminalized by 4/20 of next year. So at least that's in terms of a full-scale decriminalization bill, which might we see cannabis descheduled. But what about safe banking? That is what we obviously want passed in the NDAA. Now, we don't have an update on that. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens this month. But I think that Republican bill is good pressure to add. And then our favorite contributor from Reddit did add to his Understand Washington piece what Virginia and the GOP bill means. So I'm going to leave this here. All the links will be below if you want to check it out. Now you can go pull it, but basically he did just add his 2 cents after all of this, and he thinks, what does this all mean? Sadly, at this moment, it means that this explosion of energy is still a bit premature. The NDAA with SAFE is still not likely, but in my opinion, however, it remains a possibility. So I mean, obviously, this guy doesn't know either because this is a complete contradiction in a sentence. And I appreciate you sharing your views, but it's basically him just saying, look, we don't know. We're going to have to hope for the best. And so I just wanted to share that because it's good to read a contrarian view and take this in like, yeah, it's totally possible. We might have to plan and adjust, plan accordingly, and it might take even longer. That is possible. So I wanted to share that. But on top of that, there was published by MJ Biz Daily, Safe Banking Status Q&A with Cannabis Industry Ally, U.S. Rep. Ed Perlmutter. So on top of this perspective, which would be the fact that we might not get safe in the NDAA, we actually got this interview with Perlmutter, and I wanted to go to the bottom just to share some of his answers. More importantly, do you think the fate of safe banking this year will likely be determined by who's chosen to be in the conference committee and where those members stand on safe and cannabis in general? And he responds, no, I don't think the fate of it rises or falls depending on the conference committee. We've been working very hard to sensitize various senators to this amendment that's been added to the NDAA so that they know what's coming, that it's not a surprise, that it is an important amendment from the House's point of view, that it's got strong bipartisan support, and that it will remain in the bill through conference. The place where we were able to add it in was through the House and Rules Committee, and I know I have the support of the members, Democrats and Republicans. Other pieces of legislation that might come through the Rules Committee, which is pretty much everything, we could add SAFE again as an amendment. So I would say that the NDAA is not the last stop by any stretch. Whatever other pieces of legislation that comes through that have potential for amendments, you can bet I'm going to be watching for that. And sitting on the Rules Committee gives me a perch to do that. The sentiment is there to pass the Safe Banking Act, and I'm confident that one way or another, I think it'll be in the NDAA, this is coming from Ed Perlmutter, that the bill will ultimately pass the House and Senate to the White House for the president's signature. So just wanted to share that too. We've got two perspectives. Our favorite Reddit contributor who does bring a lot of insights and has helped keep us calm through these moments and has experience in Washington, sharing that he doesn't think it's going to pass, which is fair. But then we also have Ed Perlmutter saying that he thinks it will pass in the NDAA based on all the work he's put in. So obviously we don't know, but I just wanted to share these two because, like I said, November's just going to get more and more interesting as we go on through. So this Trulieve announces opening of first West Virginia medical cannabis dispensary. So I did not anticipate them to get this going quickly enough, but they did announce as fast as they did, announce the opening of its first dispensary in West Virginia. Trulieve Morgantown, located on Earl Core Road, will be the first dispensary in the state to sell medical cannabis. Trulieve will host a ribbon cutting and open its doors at the Morgantown dispensary on Friday, November 12th, and the company also plans to open its second retail location in Weston, located at 137 Staunton Drive on Monday, November 5th. So just to add to this, was my first thought last year when I see that Trulieve has bought, or they won licenses in West Virginia. I thought, okay, well, how long is it going to take for them to actually implement, and get their business up and running in West Virginia? Well, didn't take that long because they're already opening their first medical dispensary. So obviously in West Virginia, rec is a long time away, but you can get on the ground there first and be one of the first few medical dispensaries to open. Shows a lot of promise, and just good on Trulieve for continuing to execute. Well, this is another Canadian LP that did release their earnings, so I did want to go through this because, besides Tilray, I don't talk very well about some of the other LPs just based on the history I've watched them go through. But one sleeper that I did want to introduce to you is Village Farms International. They are a smaller Canadian LP, so they don't try to operate on the scale of size that Tilray and Canopy do. However, we're going to go through some of their numbers and see that they are the most fundamentally healthy LP in Canada right now, and they are making some moves that might put them in a good position going forward in the future. So just wanted to share this. Their third quarter 2021 financial results, adjusted EBITDA up 49% year over year, and another record quarter for Pure Sunfarm sales and adjusted EBITDA. So the main highlights I wanted to take you through was that with their Canadian cannabis Pure Sunfarms revenue. So they are a vegetable distribution company as well, Village Farms International, but they decided to get into cannabis when Canada decided to legalize. And with that, they achieved record revenue, gross margin, and adjusted EBITDA since the launch of its retail branded products in late 2019. But again, so this is cannabis sales alone, not part of their vegetable distribution sales, which you kind of want to separate them because they can end up tying them together. But 53% year-over-year growth in the cannabis sales, and 13% sequential growth in total net sales to $34.5 million. US 27.4, while they managed 44% gross revenue margin with their cannabis sales, above the company's stated target range of 30 to 40, with 93% year-over-year and 20% sequential growth in adjusted EBITDA to $10.9 million, the 12th consecutive quarter of positive adjusted EBITDA. While they've maintained the leading market share position in key markets, in Ontario by kilogram sold and dollar sold for the third quarter 2021, and for the period since retail branded sales launched in October 2019, while they also managed to hold that in Alberta for the third quarter of 2021 and monthly since October 2020 by dollar sold, while maintaining the same market share in British Columbia as well. But I think most notable is remaining the top-selling licensed producer of dried flower products in Ontario for the quarter ended September 30th. And because Ontario is where most of our population lives, that's where most of the sales are going to be driven through. So just wanted to highlight that, as they are picking up steam and taking some of that market share from other LPs. So total gross sales did increase to 45.6, up from 28.8 at this time last year in 2020. So that's an increase of 59%. Total net sales did increase by 53%, and their gross margin on cannabis 44%, up from 34%, representing a 26% increase, helping them achieve a positive net income of $6.7 million, up from $2.8 million for their cannabis business alone, which is a 140% increase from last year. But I think this does make them one of the more fundamentally healthy and profitable Canadian LPs right now that's actually producing a positive operating income. So good job, Pure Sunfarms there. Now, their selling general administrative costs did also increase by over 100%. So had they kept this down, I'm not sure what it went to specifically, but had they kept that down, they would have kept more profits to themselves. But so if you want to break it down, this is the 3 months ended September 30th and 9 months ended September 30th. And then if we take a look at the sales breakdown, their retail and flower makes up most of the sales, 59% compared to 49% last year, with retail, oil, and 2.0 products making 7%, up from 4% last year, while wholesale, flower, and trim decreased from 34% to 47%. So they're definitely taking up the market share in Ontario, which is positive to see. And then lastly, a few highlights just to share that slowly but surely, they are making plays into other markets, like some of the larger scales LPs. So acquired 100% interest in profitable Colorado-based CBD platform Balance Health Botanicals, which owns and operates one of the leading brands in the U.S. CBD market, providing immediate entry into the market in a consumer products category adjacent to the high THC cannabis market, as well as the broader consumer packaged goods wellness area. And with that, they entered into an option agreement whereby the company has the right to acquire an 80% ownership interest in Netherlands-based Lely Holland BV, one of 10 applicants selected by lottery to receive a license, subject to customary government approval, to legally cultivate and distribute cannabis to retailers under the Dutch government's experiment to investigate closed cannabis supply chains. So not to say that this is going to make them revenue anytime soon, but it shows that they are looking into Europe as well for the opportunity there, as they started out as just a produce company selling vegetables and distributing them across North America. Over the last few years, they've now shifted their focus to become a vertically integrated plant-based consumer products company, targeting high-growth, large market opportunities in North America and around the world, including cannabinoids, wellness-related products, and fresh produce. So it just goes to show that there are other smaller LPs out there that are picking up steam, eating up market share, and producing positive operating income as opposed to losing all of the money that they've been given, like Canopy and Aurora. So just wanted to share that. On to this one from Todd Harrison, some clippets. This one's from Camilo, but I just wanted to show this highlight. That didn't take long from Puff Daddy. The JP Morgan not rated news could be over before it begins. Last week, the gasoline on the fire for cannabis stocks was news that JP Morgan would prohibit its clients from buying U.S. cannabis stocks beginning on November 8th. The news caught many investors by surprise as it came out of nowhere with no plausible explanation as to why now. We believe this event likely accelerated the selling pressure in blue-chip cannabis names like GTI. According to our new contacts, we believe JP Morgan has rescinded its decision and will continue clearing U.S. cannabis stock trades for its clients. If true, this would add a positive catalyst that could materialize this week. But why? Why initiate that in the first place? So I just think that's funny. If you wanted to read this, though, there's a lot here. You can grab the link below. I'm not going to end up reading this whole thing. A few more snippets, though. So thank you, Todd, for sharing this one, but also thank you for sharing this from Jeffries, Todd. So if you want to grab the links, you can grab them, or you can just pause to read this, as well as this snippet here. So that one comes from Jeffries on U.S. Cannabis. This one is from Pablo. This one is on November 3rd and then November 8th. So thank you, Todd, for sharing this from Pablo, who's with Cantor Fitzgerald. So this was from November 3rd, a little more negative. November 8th, after the news of the Republican bill, probably a bit more positive. And then lastly, this one from Todd Harrison also shares V8 Capital on cannabis. So you can pause to read, or you can grab the links below as well. So a few other state developments, as New Jersey's medical cannabis dispensaries say they could sell legal weed now if the state stopped dragging its feet. So it always shows how it's usually the government that's delaying things, but it's the private enterprises that are ready to get going as long as the government would allow them. As a group representing New Jersey's medical cannabis dispensaries said the companies are ready to start selling cannabis to the public now. They just need approval from the state. As the New Jersey Cannabis Trade Association posted on its website that the state's alternative treatment centers have enough cannabis to meet both patient demand and that of a 21 and older market. While the statement contradicts what New Jersey's Cannabis Regulatory Commission had said, the commission will set a start date for legal sales and has a statutory deadline of mid-February to do so. But there is speculation that they might miss it, and the commission already blew a deadline to start accepting applications for new cannabis business licenses last month. What a surprise! Slow bureaucracy causing delays. But at the same time, a majority of New Jersey's medical cannabis companies belong to the trade group, and the message titled Open NJ Now claims the alternative treatment centers have ample supply to service the adult use market now without harming access for medical cannabis patients. And they are ready to open for adult use sales today, the website said. It cannot be emphasized enough that the alternative treatment centers in New Jersey have ample supply and resource to service adult use consumers now without harming access for New Jersey's medical cannabis patients, who will always come first. So it's a big claim that these companies are making, but at the same time, it just highlights that, again, it's always the government dragging its feet, not allowing businesses to start doing what they got into business to do in the first place. So hopefully that does change soon. But on top of that, for Marijuana Moment, another poll shows majority support for cannabis legalization, including most Republicans. Now, we know that this popularity is increasing, and a majority of U.S. adults, including most Republicans, support national cannabis legalization, another poll has found. It's the second such national survey released over the past week, as Rasmussen reports asked Americans if they support national legalization legalization of cannabis, and 62% of respondents said yes. One of the more notable demographics to voice support for the policy change was Republicans, 54% of whom said they'd back legalization. That's compared to 68% of Democrats and 62% who said that they had an other political affiliation. So popularity is building, which will allow the pressure to continue to mount. While on top of this, Hoosier Republicans support cannabis legalization as well. There's a new poll shows that a majority of Republicans in Indiana favor some form of legalization when it comes to cannabis. The poll conducted by BK Strategies this past September shows that 52% of Republicans surveyed favored legalization for both cannabis for medical and recreational use, while only 40% opposed, and that's compared to 65% of the general population supporting both medicinal and adult use, while only 28% opposed it. 66% of independents supported it, while 20% supported it as well. So cannabis is becoming more and more popular, while older adults are using cannabis more than ever before. So this is a story we keep hearing over and over. When I go into a dispensary, there are more elderly people in there than there are younger people. Yes, because cannabis is a medicine. Like, it's not news unless you didn't realize this or just have not switch that in your brain that cannabis is not a bad thing. It's a medicine. Cannabis use is on the rise among older adults. Last year, the proportion of adults 65 and older who reported recent cannabis use jumped by 18%, according to a 2020 National Survey of Drug Use and Health released last week, rising from 5.1% in 2019 to 6% in 2020. So it's not a massive jump overall at all, but the spike comes on the heels of a steady trend of increasing cannabis use among seniors in the last 5 years. What's more, in 2020, more older adults are reporting using cannabis sometime in their lifetime, a jump from roughly 32% to 36%, signaling a possible cultural shift in older adults' willingness to open up about past tokes. It's accepted now, Marvin Yeoman said. You used to have to sneak into a back alley to purchase it, but now you can walk right into the store and buy it just like you would go to a Publix or a Winn-Dixie. In Florida, people with medical cannabis card can legally purchase THC products throughout the state. And as I've reported every Sunday in the This Week in Cannabis segment, Florida continues to add patients, medical cannabis patients, at a pretty quick rate, roughly almost 3,000 to 4,000 a month, and that's got them up to about 638,000 patients right now. But think about the population of Florida. It's 21.5 million. Think about the amount of tourists that they get in. So this is a Florida-based article, obviously, so that highlights why they mentioned that in Florida. But think when Florida opens from medicinal to adult use, man, that market is going to explode. But yes, I mean, obviously, when older people change how they view cannabis, then it allows more older people to enjoy the benefits of cannabis. And then on to this one, top Mexican senators say there's agreement to prioritize cannabis legalization legislation this session. Now, this is so annoying because we just keep getting more talk from Mexican senators, so I'm just going to share what they've said. A top Mexican senator says that there's agreement among key legislative leaders of multiple parties to prioritize cannabis legalization legislation this session. Senate Majority Leader Ricardo Monreal Avila of the ruling Morena Party made the comments following a meeting of the Political Coordination Board on Monday. He said that the panel agreed to prioritize cannabis laws, among other issues like cybersecurity, according to a translation, which is what they said last time, so they keep kicking the can down the road. Have they given us a date? We are the Mexico of freedoms, and the people are aware of it, she said. Lawmakers will take up implementation legislation in the coming weeks or months, but I do not want more time to pass, she said. And that's it. So we have no conclusive news out of Mexico except that they're going to continue talking about what they're going to continue to do. But hopefully we'll see some action someday, and it will pleasantly surprise us, as some celebrities like Seth Rogan and Sarah Silverman partner with cannabis businesses to press senators for legalization. So a coalition of cannabis advocacy and industry groups, as well as celebrities like Seth Rogan and Sarah Silverman, launched a campaign on Tuesday meant to encourage voters to reach out to their senators and demand action on legislation to federally legalize cannabis. Because this is how it gets done. And I'm calling on this on every video, so please, if you are American and you want this done, please take action and reach out to call your local representatives. The Cannabis in Common campaign is led by the U.S. Cannabis Council, USCC, and Headcount's Cannabis Voter Project. The organizations teamed up with a slew of major cannabis businesses like Canopy Growth, Columbia Care, Cresco Labs, and Weed Maps for the initiative. So, just want to share this clip from Seth Rogan as he highlights...
Hi, I'm Seth Rogan, and despite what you may have heard, Americans can actually agree on something, and that something is weed. Recent polls show that more than 2/3 of us now want to legalize cannabis. You know who cannot agree on anything, though? Politicians. So despite the fact that 69% of us want cannabis legal, less than half of senators have come out in favor of it. In fact, some won't even say where they stand on the issue at all. With the Senate about to consider a landmark bill that would legalize cannabis at the federal level and wipe cannabis convictions from thousands of people's records, their silence could end up being the difference. But here's the thing about elected officials. They actually spend most of their time worrying about getting re-elected.
That's their job.
So when their inboxes and their phone lines are blowing up with constituents all rallying behind something specific, that is when things actually start to happen. Here's what I'm asking for you to do. Go to cannabisincommon.org now and let your elected officials know that legalizing cannabis is an extremely popular thing that they should advocate for. Legalizing cannabis for good is long past due, but if we make enough noise, we can make it happen. Visit cannabisincommon.org to email or call your elected officials. The American people have cannabis in common. It's time for Congress to join us.
Well said, Seth. And so yeah, I just wanted to relay that. I will put this link, Cannabis in Common, below. So if you have not reached out, the best thing you can do is to just call or send some form of communication to your local state reps and say, I support this. It's long overdue. Pass safe banking, deschedule cannabis from the CSA. It is time, and it's up to the American people. And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned today? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or concerns. But I will be back on Friday for an episode to relay Green Thumb earnings, Cresco Labs, and Veranos as well. And then I'll be back on Sunday as well for This Week in Cannabis News. So if you enjoyed this, please leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Friday. Have a great week, everybody.